On February 26, 1991, after being kicked out of Kuwait in the final days of the Gulf War, thousands of Iraqi soldiers retreated from the country along Highway 80. U.S.-led forces were waiting and trapped the convoy on the highway. They spent 10 hours bombing the fuck out of the Iraqis in what some would later call a massacre of peacefully retreating soldiers. Was it though? Let's take a closer look at something retreating. This way comes. And this is the part where I'd put that sweet, sweet intro music, if I had some. But I don't. Maybe one day, but not today. Hello and welcome to Something This Way Comes. I'm Andrew, and with me is my still silent co-host, Frank D. Reaper. Tonight we are taking a closer look at the Highway of Death. In August 1990, Iraqi forces, consisting of an estimated 180,000 soldiers and 18,000 tanks, which is a fucking lot of tanks, used Highway 80, a 6-lane highway which connected the city of Basra in Iraq to Kuwait City, to invade Iraq's southern neighbor Kuwait to settle long-standing tensions, such as the $8 to $10 billion debt Kuwait refused to forget about that Iraq had racked up in loans during the Iraq-Iran war, and of course, to capture their oil fields. Because it's always about the oil. With the oil fields in Iraq's possession, they would control roughly 20% of the world's oil. Kuwait at this point had a standing army of roughly 20,000. They wouldn't hold out long against this massive amount of invaders. This would lead directly into the conflict called the Gulf War. Nearly 6 months later, they would use the same highway to retreat from the U.S.-led forces. On February 26, 1991, coalition forces, consisting of soldiers from the United States, Canada, France, and England, began the attack under orders from General Norman Schwarzkopf. Good old Stormin' Norman. Grumman A-6 intruders from the Marine Corps' 3rd Marine Aircraft Division led the assault by dropping Mk-20 Rockeye-2 cluster bombs, destroying the vehicles in the front and rear of the convoy. The convoy consisting of thousands of Iraqi tanks, armored vehicles, and trucks. Mixed in with all that military hardware was hundreds of civilian vehicles, effectively trapping the convoy on the highway. With nowhere to run, some of the Iraqi soldiers and civilians who were also fleeing the fighting abandoned their vehicles and fled into the desert, as waves of U.S. Navy, Air Force, and Marine aircraft launching from the USS Ranger aircraft carrier swooped in and unleashed the fury of the munitions they carried, turning the stretch of highway into an abattoir of broken bodies and twisted and mangled burning vehicles, sending waves of smoke into the still desert air. Casualties from this attack would remain low since shortly after the attack began, anyone who could abandon their vehicles and escape into the desert did so. On the Iraqi side of the border, Highway 8, the 1st Armored Division Hammurabi of the Republican Guard was hammered by U.S. artillery units and a battalion of AH-64 Apache attack helicopters under the command of General Barry McCaffrey. Hundreds of mostly military vehicles grouped in defensive formations of roughly a dozen each were hunted down and eliminated over a 50-mile stretch of Highway 8 in the surrounding desert. By the end of the 10-hour assault, an estimated 200 Iraqis lay dead, with some sources putting that estimate over 1,000. Between 18,000 and 2,700 vehicles, both military and civilian, destroyed, and 2,000 Iraqi soldiers captured. Military personnel would later claim the attack was a necessity since blocking the highway would prevent Iraqi reinforcements from moving north and west of Kuwait and to protect nearby Allied forces. After photos of the devastation circulated around the globe, the assault was highly criticized, with many wondering if war crimes had been committed under the Third Geneva Convention, since the coalition forces failed to distinguish between military targets and civilians. Others would criticize the attack on a peacefully retreating army, which in my opinion is complete and utter bullshit. This was not a peaceful retreat. They were running away after destroying whole neighborhoods. And if reports are true, they tortured and executed hundreds of Kuwaiti citizens before running. They also committed the largest act of eco-terrorism in history when they set fire to over 700 of Kuwait's 950 oil fields. Smoke from these fires was so thick that it literally blocked out the sun in Kuwait City. The average temperature for the entire region dropped. And below all the smoke, pollution was severe, with soot particles being over 1,000 times the normal. And all that sulfur dioxide that was thrown into the air caused acid rain to fall as far away as Pakistan. It took until November, almost a year later, to get these fires under control, which were burning up roughly 6 million barrels of oil a day, and for temperature and the air quality in the region to return to normal. 2 days after the Highway of Death attack, under heavy criticism for the assault, President George W. Bush would call for an immediate ceasefire and an end of the Gulf War. Also, it should be noted that there's a difference between a retreating army and a surrendered army. A retreat is a military tactic used in battle, meaning the army is still considered as combatants, where a surrendered army is not. At this point in the war, Iraq had not surrendered. Therefore, they would not have been covered under Article 3 of the Geneva Convention, which primarily deals with the treatment of POWs. Also, with the civilian vehicles that were mixed in with this convoy, some sources claim they contained pro-Iraqi refugees. However, later military officials would claim most, if not all, of the vehicles had been stolen by Iraqi soldiers, with evidence that the vehicles contained items looted from Kuwait City during the retreat. Now, the real question here is that covered by insurance? Does car insurance cover acts of war? What was that conversation with the insurance company like? Hello, State Farm? Yes, my car was stolen by an invading army and was later blown up by a liberating army. Am I covered? You can just see the poor claims adjuster out on this highway picking through, trying to find the only Geo Metro in all of Kuwait. I don't even know if they made Geo Metros in 91. They might have. Probably, I don't know. Just seems ridiculous that in a rich city like Kuwait City, someone's driving a DF Geo Metro. And oh shit, I've completely lost my train of thought on that. Alright, anyways, on with this show. In 1995, Norman Schwarzkopf explained his motivations for launching the assault. The first reason why we bombed the highway coming north out of Kuwait is because there was a great deal of military equipment on that highway, and I had given orders to all my commanders that I wanted every piece of Iraqi equipment that we possibly could destroy, he was quoted as saying. Secondly, this was not a bunch of innocent people just trying to make their way back across the border to Iraq, he went on. This was a bunch of rapists, murderers, and thugs who had raped and pillaged downtown Kuwait City and now were trying to get out of the country before they were caught. Along with the human costs of the assault, the highway and surrounding area had become polluted by oil leaking from the damaged tanks and military vehicles, and the fires caused plumes of heavy, toxic smoke to rise into the air. The assault would set a precedent for future military operations, highlighting the importance of adhering to international law and maintaining a high ethical standard of warfare. And that was the Highway of Death. Make sure to come back for more fun in the sand as we take a look at the Battle of Rumalia. Thank you for listening, and please consider leaving a rating or review on the app you're listening in on. And as always, you can reach me directly at podsomething@gmail.com with any questions and comments. Thank you and goodbye. Thousands of Iraqi soldiers retreated from the country along Highway 80.